Imagine the howl of a cold prairie wind outside. Now picture yourself stepping indoors, where the warm, resonant pluck of an acoustic guitar just cuts right through that chill. We're going back to the 1970s today, to a very specific place, and a completely unique sound that literally shaped a nation's cultural DNA. Because, you see, this isn't just a story about music, it's about the very birth of the modern Canadian identity.
So where was Canada's musical identity truly born? It's so easy to just default to the big players, right? Places with towering skylines and massive industries like Toronto or Montreal. I mean, those cities had all the recording studios, the executive money, and the huge populations. But here's the thing. A nation's true cultural voice, it rarely comes from a boardroom. Actually, a quiet acoustic revolution was brewing somewhere entirely unexpected, miles away from the traditional star makers.
Section 1. Roots in the Prairies. All right, let's set the scene. Winnipeg in the 1970s presented this stark reality that totally rejected the polished, flashy stadium rock dominating the era. Think about the bitter cold of those prairie winters and the city's deep working-class roots. This was definitely not a place for glamour. Isolation was just a fact of life here, geographically and culturally. And when those winters forced people indoors for months on end, music wasn't just background noise. It was a literal survival mechanism for warmth and connection. The music born out of this environment, it wasn't smoothed over by corporate producers hunting for a quick radio hit. No way. It was incredibly raw, gritty, and just unapologetically honest. That harsh, working-class reality is exactly what gave Winnipeg's music its unpolished power, laying the absolute foundation for a deeply authentic national sound. Because of that unforgiving environment, the music was inherently grounded in real, everyday stories. We're talking urgent narratives about working in the rail yards, the migration of laborers across the plains, and just the simple daily struggle to get by. Now, of course, these artists were listening to the wider North American folk revival. They were hearing giants like Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell who were busy breaking the mold. But the Winnipeg scene didn't just mimic them. Instead, they took that global inspiration and filtered it directly through their own distinct prairie reality. The result? A sound that celebrated the humble and the hardworking, traits that would very quickly become synonymous with the Canadian identity itself. These lyrics weren't about escaping reality, they were a mirror held right up to the working class soul.
Section 2. Coffeehouses as creative incubators.
This whole movement didn't start in massive, echoing stadiums with wild laser shows. Not even close. It incubated in small, dimly lit, completely unpretentious spaces scattered around the city. The local coffeehouse circuit provided this revolutionary environment, the listening room. Think about it. In a loud bar, the music is always fighting with clinking glasses and shouted conversations. But in these coffeehouses, under dim lights, centered around just a single microphone, there was a culture of total, respectful silence. It was a remarkably safe space. Musicians were actually encouraged to take massive creative risks, try out wild new tunings, and really dive into vulnerable storytelling because they knew the audience was sitting down and truly absorbing every single word. And this environment completely flipped the traditional power dynamic between artist and fan. Songs were no longer just passive entertainment meant to be consumed and forgotten. They were deep, intimate conversations. This acoustic simplicity fostered a profound connection, basically tearing down that invisible wall between the stage and the seats. It required real humility from the performer and active, focused engagement from the listener. This specific dynamic, this unassuming, deeply connective conversation, became a core value of the Canadian musical identity. It was the complete opposite of the distant, totally inaccessible rock stars of the time.
Section 3. Voices of the Movement.
Out of those dim coffeehouse crucibles emerged some incredibly powerful voices that would soon define an entire generation. Artists like Valdy and Bruce Cockburn became absolute central figures in this movement. And, while not every musician was originally born in Winnipeg, the city became this irresistible, magnetic meeting point. Ideas just collided here. Cockburn, for instance, found a highly receptive audience for his really unique blend of sharp political awareness and deep spiritual storytelling. And Valdy? He connected instantly with his grounded, everyman approach. They weren't just playing songs, they were chronicling the times, all delivered with that signature acoustic simplicity. Basically, Winnipeg provided the critical mass these voices needed to really refine their messages before taking them out to the rest of the world.
Section 4. The 1974 Folk Festival.
Now, 1974. That was the year everything changed. It marked a monumental climax in our story with the founding of the very first Winnipeg Folk Festival, set in the sprawling, beautiful landscape of Birds Hill Park. Driven by grassroots efforts, a massive amount of volunteer coordination, and visionary founders like Mitch Podolak, the goal was super ambitious. They wanted to take that intense, intimate magic of the indoor coffeehouse and release it into the wide-open summer air of the prairies. It was a huge gamble, really, to see if this quiet, localized secret could scale up and actually translate to a massive outdoor crowd.
Well, spoiler alert, it didn't just scale. It completely revolutionized the concept of live music in the country. Up until then, the standard music concert model was purely transactional, right? You buy a ticket, you watch a band on a distant stage, you go home. The 1974 festival obliterated that model. It became a holistic community celebration of culture and shared experience. Through interactive daytime workshops, on-site camping, and artists literally mingling right there with the fans, it erased the boundary between performer and audience. It wasn't just a gig anymore, it was a gathering. And this specific immersive model instantly became the gold standard. It literally laid the blueprint for how music festivals would operate all across Canada for decades to come.
Section 5. Shaping a national identity. So this isolated local phenomenon, it refused to stay localized. It radiated outwards, and in doing so, it redefined an entire country's art. That prairie isolation had successfully forged 3 distinct pillars of this music. It was deeply reflective, unashamedly political, and intensely connected to a sense of place. This is what we call the Winnipeg blueprint. Unlike the more commercial, heavily produced American folk pop of the era, the Canadian sound prioritized vulnerability and geographic reverence. And this ethos spread coast to coast, fundamentally shaping the creative DNA of future artists. From the Maritimes all the way to British Columbia, the true identity of Canadian music, its soul, its lyrical depth, its community-focused spirit, was forged right here, smack in the center of the country.
Section 6. Why Winnipeg Matters Today.
So we have to ask, why did this happen in this specific underdog city? Well, geographic isolation actually acted as a vital shield against corporate music trends. Far removed from industry pressure and the constant demand for radio-friendly hits, musicians were free to just experiment, because there was no massive financial windfall waiting around the corner. They valued community over fame. They were literally playing for each other and their neighbors, not for stardom. And finally, the literal and metaphorical quiet of the prairies allowed these voices to be heard clearly, without the noise of a bustling metropolis drowning them out. The isolation wasn't a handicap at all. Actually, scratch that, it was the essential ingredient that allowed a unique, community-first ethos to completely thrive.
This era is far more than just some fleeting historical footnote. The legacy lives on in every single acoustic chord and protest song written in the country today. Every modern indie folk artist, every roots festival spanning from Edmonton to Mariposa, and every modern songwriter who prioritizes honest storytelling over stadium theatrics, they all owe a massive debt to the foundation built in those dimly lit prairie coffeehouses. The values established in 1970s Winnipeg, authenticity, community, and reflective storytelling, they remain the absolute bedrock of the Canadian musical identity.
Which brings us to a final, vital question to think about. Do places like Winnipeg, these underdog cities far removed from massive industry capitals, still have the power to shape music and forge cohesive national identities today? Or has the sprawling, borderless reality of the internet completely changed how a nation discovers its voice? Can a localized scene still create a national identity, or is the era of the geographic blueprint over? I'd love to hear your take, so let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into culture, art, and history. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.